Morning, everyone, and welcome to this episode of our Smart Sandyford webinar series. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into the Internet of Things, or IoT. I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Diarmuid Collins from Pervasive Nation in the Connect Centre, Trinity College Dublin, and Will Ferguson from VT-IoT, the Sigfox operator in Ireland. You're both very welcome. We're doing a lot of work with IoT with local companies, Semicon and the Convex Lens as part of the Small Business Innovation Research Fund. And Dunleer Ratdown are also doing an energy monitoring project in County Hall. So there's a lot of activity in this space going on in the county. And I'm really looking forward to discussing it all with the guys. The overarching theme of the webinar series is to look at smart city topics and explore how the use of technology-based solutions can enhance the lives of residents and employees in Sandyford, but also the wider Dublin region as well. Thank you to those of you who've already sent questions into us. For those watching live this morning, feel free just to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask the panelists any questions throughout the talk. Will, I'll go to you first. So just to introduce you, Will is a trained accountant, but in 2015, along with his business partner, Mark Bannon, they founded VT-IoT, and they've led the deployment of the Sigfox network across Ireland. Currently, this is the only nationwide IoT network, but it's also in 72 countries worldwide. So VT support hundreds of thousands of devices across Ireland. And maybe, Will, I could let you talk a little bit more about VT and current Sigfox use cases.
Yeah, thanks for giving away that trade secret, Connor, about being an accountant, a recovering accountant. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. So yeah, to give you a bit of background, VT operates Ireland's first nationwide dedicated, what we call a zero-G IoT network, and it's specifically designed to connect simple object sensors and things using very low power and at a very low cost. And our network is built on a technology called Sigfox. VT itself is actually partly state-owned. So our largest shareholder is RTE, their networking division, a company called 2RN. So it's a wholly owned subsidiary of RTE. And more importantly than being our largest shareholder, they're our network partner. So they allow us to deliver Sigfox communication services into almost every home and business in the country. So we use their physical mast infrastructure that they have around the country, and we place our equipment on top of that infrastructure. So we have a completely independent network using their physical towers and engineering teams. And it allows us to build and deliver a very robust network in Ireland, which is quite important for the service we offer. So we're dealing with companies who are buying a network service, so it's very important that it's secure and reliable. And by putting it on the RTE infrastructure, we get that outcome, you know. So the Sigfox technology itself, and being a network operator in Ireland, it's not just confined to Ireland. It's a global network. So we're one of 72 countries where we've built out the network. And if you buy a subscription to the network for your product in Ireland, it'll work seamlessly in any of the 72 countries. So we cover a wide array of use cases. The technology touches lots of different verticals, and I'll talk about those more throughout the presentation.
Fantastic, thanks a million. Looking forward to hearing more about that sort of international network and how the devices are able to go from one country to another. It sounds fascinating. Diarmuid, over to you now. So Diarmuid is a computer scientist. He completed his PhD from Trinity College Dublin in 2016. And since then, he's been working with Connect in Trinity, where he manages the Iris testbed. He's been working on information-centric networking, or ICN, remote experimentation, e-learning, and testbed integration through Pervasive Nation. Diarmuid, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the test lab and how researching IoT works. What are the research projects?
A lot of the testbed, a lot of the research that we're doing or that's coming into the Iris testbed, to the Pervasive Nation testbed, is environmental stuff. So I guess from my side, I'm more networks type of stuff. So I sort of moved the testbed towards open source technologies and like we help a lot the experimenters coming in and training them and stuff like that. So you know, that's kind of the work we kind of do with Pervasive Nation.
Brilliant. So we can jump into the questions now. So Will, hopefully IoT is a little bit more than just turning your kettle on with your phone. Maybe you could tell us, what is IoT and how's it developed over the last 10 years?
Yeah, sorry, Connor, it cut out there. Was that for me?
Yeah, Will, sorry, I'll repeat the question. So what is IoT and how has it developed over the last 10 years?
Yeah, so we kind of classify IoT as the, first of all, it's the next major tech disruption, and it's already happening. So if you think of the introduction of the internet was kind of the first major tech revolution, and then you have the introduction of smartphones, which was even bigger, and for us even bigger again is the introduction of IoT, Internet of Things. So it's the idea that absolutely everything will be connected in the physical world around us to the internet. So you know, that's everything from when you go into work to the desk you're sitting at, to where you park your car, to the lights in a building, to the meters in a building. Everything will be connected. And what's really interesting is that the majority of predicted connections for IoT in the future, they actually relate to things and objects and sensors that really only require sending very small amounts of data to and from the cloud. So if you think of things like temperature in a building, or GPS coordinates of assets, door open, on, off, movement of things, all these types of use cases only require very small bytes of information, 1 or 2 in most cases. With GPS coordinates, it's up to 6 or 12. But again, we're talking very small amounts of data. And up until very recently, we didn't have the network infrastructure that enabled the connection of simple object sensors and things. We have the network infrastructure and very good infrastructure for connecting things that require high amounts of data and high bandwidth, like phones and laptops and iPads, but we didn't have a network or network technologies that would specifically enable what's going to be the majority of what makes up the IoT market, which is these simple object sensors and things connecting the physical world to the digital world around us. So if you looked at the traditional technologies that were available, we had things like cellular, which everyone's familiar with. Great technology, but it's quite expensive. It uses lots of power. It's complex. And while it's pervasive, it's everywhere. The fact that, you know, you might only get a couple of days or a couple of weeks charge out of a sensor using that type of technology, it wasn't really fit for purpose when we're talking about enabling the connection of everything around us. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are also great traditional connectivity technologies, but they're short range. While they're low power in most instances, like with Bluetooth, you're confined by range. So it was only really over the last, you know, between 5 and 10 years that we've had the introduction of new networks that are specifically designed to cater for the majority of IoT. And that's why we're only really seeing IoT taking off now. It's been talked about to death for years and years and years. But now over the last, 3 to 4 years, well, in VT anyway, we were seeing an explosion in IoT and in companies and use cases where you're trying to connect everything around you. And that's because we've got a new type of technology, which we originally coined as low power wide area, because the network itself, the technology, is based on devices that can transmit data using very little power. And why that is important is because, again, if we're talking about connecting everything around us, we're not always going to have a power connection. So it's important that we can deploy a sensor for years or decades, and it can be autonomous without any human interaction, because the very cost of sending someone back there to change batteries, for example, that's usually more expensive than the sensor itself and the connectivity for a number of years. So yeah, we're at a stage now where we have these technologies. Sigfox, the technology that we've rolled out in Ireland, being one, but there's also the likes of MBiot, which is a cellular version of a low power technology, is also available now, and the LoRa technology as well is available. But we would very much see that there's not going to be one connectivity winner in terms of this what some companies deem as a race. That's not the way we see the market at all. It really depends on what your use case is, and that's where you start. You start with your use case, what's needed, what's required, and then you work back what the best technology fit is for that particular use case, because they're all very different and they all do different things. So that's probably, quite important when you're looking at IoT first. Don't focus on the technology. Some of our customers don't even know what technology is in the solution. They don't care really. What they care about is that it works, it delivers the data that they need at the price that they need, and it allows them to either create new revenue streams, reduce costs, or increase efficiencies.
Thank you for that. I think that's a really clear overview of where we are. But basically, you reckon, even though we've been talking about it for a long time, IoT hasn't got to where it's going to be in Ireland. Is that right? You think it's going to?
No, yeah. Like globally, we're only at the very start of this journey, and that's why it's so exciting. So it took a long time to build out the infrastructure. So in Ireland, we were actually quite advanced. We were the 5th country to build out a Sigfox network, and through our partnership with RTE, we actually built the core network in a couple of months. Now, building the network was actually one of the easier parts. After that, you need to evangelize the technology, and you need to essentially, it's something completely new. So you're going to companies who have never put technology in their products in most instances, and you're trying to show them how this will be a positive thing that will, lead to cost reductions or increased efficiencies or new revenue streams, and that takes a long time. So for a very long time, we spent a lot of time with companies trying to show them how they could actually integrate this technology, and that takes a number of years. And we've seen over the last 24 months that there's been an explosion now, because I think companies realize that they will be left behind if they don't try and connect their assets or the products they're producing in the future, because that's the way it's going. Everything is going to be connected. So we're very much at the start of the journey still, but one of the most important parts now is in place, the network infrastructure, because that allows, once that's in place, you can let the ecosystem flourish. And okay, it takes time. It takes even the best of companies, 12 to 24 months to actually go from an idea to a full commercial deployment with hundreds of thousands of devices out in the field. So, it takes time, but we have the most important piece of the puzzle. And in Ireland now, we've got a number of different options, because as I said, like our own technology and Sigfox, that's that fits in a very specific part of the IoT market. There is no one technology that fits all. So depending on your data requirement, depending on, do you need your devices to work internationally? Do you need seamless roaming? Is power an issue? What's the business case look like in terms of cost? All these things will define what technology is best for you. And then, you can work out where to go from there.
Yeah, I think I want to touch on that a little bit more in depth on how those technologies are different or why they're different. So maybe just before we go to that, you said like it's really important that we have a better understanding, and that's probably where maybe Pervasive Nation is coming in. Would that be right, Diarmuid? That helping that understanding and doing more research so that we have a better understanding of these technologies.
To one degree, we do have I guess that's one way of looking at it. being an academic and not exactly an expert in IoT, I can refer to the peer review literature to help me answer this question. So in that slide that I sent you, would you be able to show that?
Sure. Yeah.
So it kind of follows on from what Will has been talking about there. So this is an overview of the LP-WAN technology, Sigfox, LoRaWAN, and IoT. And as I said, it's from the literature. But so like with quality of service, for example, MBiot might be preferred application when you need guaranteed quality of service, while the applications that do not need this constraint should choose maybe Sigfox or LoRaWAN, that they transmit every so often. They don't need specific information all the time that's available. You may also have battery life and latency constraints. So Sigfox and LoRaWAN Class A are the best solution for latency insensitive applications, and they have longer battery life, as Will said. For IoT applications where latency, connectivity, and there are no power constraints, MBiot and LoRaWAN Class C may be the better choice. Mm-hmm. For scalability and payload length, as Will mentioned, Sigfox, as you can see there, I think the where's the it doesn't say it. Oh, it does. Maximum payload length for Sigfox is 12 bytes. LoRaWAN is 243, and I think it's 1600 for MBiot. So, you know, depending on the amount of information that you want to send back, you kind of have to think of those things as well. For scalability wise, MBiot allows connectivity of more than 100,000 devices per base station, compared to 50,000 for Sigfox and LoRaWAN. MBiot allows transmissions of 1600 bytes, whereas LoRaWAN, as I mentioned, is 243 and Sigfox is just 12. So coverage and range then come into it as well, which was kind of also mentioned, because Sigfox is pretty much kind of global now, and it's a global network at 72 countries, as Will mentioned. So that does come into it if you're tracking assets across countries. You want to know where they are at different times. You know, Sigfox, and you know, it's only, as Will said, it's transmitting GPS coordinates, so you know exactly where it is, and that's all the information you may need for that asset. You know, so so Sigfox can cover an entire city with only one base station. For example, Belgium is 42,000 square kilometers, and it's entirely covered by only seven Sigfox base stations. In contrast, LoRaWAN has a lower range. It's less than 20 kilometers. MBiot has the lowest range coverage, which is less than 10. MBiot provides mainly services for end devices, which are out of reach of cellular networks, indoor or deep indoor, within that 10-kilometer radius. In addition, MBiot needs to be deployed within LTE infrastructure, thus it might not be great for rural areas. And then you can have different deployment models. So MBiot, LoRaWAN, and Sigfox are now starting to get to the mature stage. They're, you know, they're kind of, some of them have been standardized, and they're available in various countries and cities all over the world. Unlike Sigfox and MBiot, LoRaWAN does offer local network deployments. That is a local area network using LoRa gateways, as well as you could use public network operations via base stations. For example, you can have a hybrid model where it's possible to deploy a local LoRaWAN network in a factory area and use public base stations then to cover the outside areas. So I guess that from the academic point of view kind of covers a lot of some of the points. As I said, if you go on to the second slide, Will, there's Connor, sorry. We do, like, there's pros and cons to using them as well. So one technology would probably, as Will said, one technology would probably not serve all of IoT use cases. For example, for smart agricultural devices, providing temperature and humidity and soil temperature sense data a few times per hour as the environmental conditions have not radically changed, are very suitable for LoRaWAN and Sigfox. Additionally, MBiot might not be suitable for rural areas. In contrast, electrical metering, where there's a continuous power supply available and real-time grid monitoring is required to take immediate decisions for load and interruptions, MBiot might be more suitable. And this probably going forward with the electric vehicles and charging, and when to do it and when best not to do it, and to optimize the network, MBiot might be more suitable in that scenario. So in that figure there, it provides a radar chart from the literature, from academic peer-reviewed literature, which highlights the benefits of each of these three LPWAN technologies, and what you offset against. If for performance you lose coverage, and for performance and latency you lose coverage, and cost efficiency, and it's kind of a good model to show. But as Will mentioned there is no one size fits all. There is no IoT solution for every, they're all different. It depends. There's a kind of a trade-off for all of them.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so like I'd even take it up a level and just, I suppose, talk at a high level in terms of where we would see where the different technologies fit. So Sigfox, as I've explained, is optimized for the simplest of IoT devices, and where it really comes into its own is if you have an asset base that's dispersed over a large geographical area. So that could be continents or countries, and where the business case is really cost sensitive. And for that reason, you need a very long battery life, because it means that you could write the business case off over a longer period. Where MBiot fits for us, and we've actually started, we've started tests, and we're going to add it to our portfolio because we see it as very complementary to what we're doing already. Where it fits is if the customer requires a much higher data rate than Sigfox. So Sigfox is you got a payload of 12 bytes, so you can get lots of things into 12 bytes, 2 GPS coordinates, temperature, on, off, all that good stuff. But if you need a lot more data, MBiot is a better technology because it's using licensed spectrum, which means that you can send more data. Now, that's an advantage for certain business cases, but it's a disadvantage for other business cases, because by inherently using existing licensed spectrum, you get complexity and you get cost. Now, for certain business cases, that's fine because they're not as price sensitive. So a good example where we kind of compare the two technologies and where they could be used is the tracking of pallets. So if you're a company, you're sending pallets pan-European or globally, you need a technology if you want to track these pallets to understand movements and flows and bottlenecks and where they're getting lost. You need, first of all, a solution that's a very low cost, because a pallet might be only anything from 40 euros downwards. It needs a significant battery life, because you need it to last a long time for it to make sense in terms of the business case. And it only requires a very small amount of data. So, I mean, most companies would be happy to get a location fix once a day or twice a day. So with that type of technology or that type of use case, we would see Sigfox as being the best fit, given the fact that it's a global network, it's low cost, low power, and the actual sensor to place on the pallet is going to make sense in terms of the cost. Now, that's completely different if we're talking about tracking the truck that's delivering the pallets. So the company who's responsible for delivering the pallets might want a lot more information about the driver behavior. They might need data points every couple of seconds. They might want more than location. And in that instance, a technology there where you can send a lot more data is more preferable. And also, the truck has power, so sending more data always requires more power. So being able to plug your sensor into power will make, again, it makes the idea of having a long battery life more redundant. So in that instance, we would see MBiot or LTEM, which is another version of low power cellular technology, being a better fit. Of course, there's crossover, and you could put MBiot into the tracking of pallets and lots of other assets. But when you do the numbers and you do the business case, and you're talking about tracking hundreds of thousands of pallets, it will become evident very quickly that that technology mightn't be the best fit. Where LoRa fits in for us is it's perceived as being very similar to Sigfox, and the technologies, the attributes are similar in the fact that it's low cost, low power. But what's completely different is the business model. With Sigfox, as a company, you're buying a service. With LoRa, you buy a technology. So LoRa would be perfect if you had a factory, for example, and you wanted to roll out your own private network in the factory. So you have your own internal IT team who would have the expertise to do that. And you're happy to be responsible for the security, for the base station, for the cloud, for the backhaul, upkeep time, all that kind of good stuff. So certain customers, that's a key requirement. They want to have control over the entire process, and they want to own the network. But a lot of the customers we deal with, which would be large international companies, they're concerned with, they don't actually want to be a network operator. They want to buy a service. They want to have a very stringent SLA, which is offered as part of your subscription. And they want to focus on their core business. So it really depends on the type of use case and the type of customer. As well with LoRa, like I was saying, it's very good if you want to set up your own private network in a certain area. But if you have a use case that requires assets to move from territory to territory, country to country, well, then it's not going to be, at the moment anyway, it's not going to be the most optimal technology, because there's lots of different LoRa networks in different countries. But the roaming aspect, while it's technically possible, it's not a commercial service as of yet. And it's more complicated because every LoRa network is slightly different and has different owners. Whereas with Sigfox, we're all part of the same family, so it makes it easy and seamless when you're dealing with assets moving from country to country. So it really depends. That can be an advantage in some use cases, and it can be a disadvantage in the other use case. So I can't stress enough, that's the main place to start. Start with your business case, start with your use case, and then decide on the technology after that, based on what you have.
So, yeah, I agree with you there, Will. We have it's pretty much effectively an open source network now, built on open source technologies, and LoRaWAN, and it is complicated and it's not easy, and you do need to know you do need to know your stuff, and like I guess you do need to know a lot of stuff about a lot of things, because security will come into it as well, and then so you, like as you say, it has to, you really need to figure out what exactly do you want to know first. I think that's one of the first steps. What do you want to know from this asset? Does it move, like what does it do? Does it move around? Does it stay put? Or do you want it completely secure? Do you need to build your own network to do that? Do you not trust the Vodafones or the VTs or the Pervasive Nations or the similar networks, the Things networks? Do you not trust them? Do you want to do it? And you 100% you can do it. It's not a problem. You can do that. So it's really about defining what exactly do you want your device to do, and then they're trying to fit it around a use case. Like for example, a lot of our users or experimenters are environmentalists, so they're concerned about water levels in rivers and rainfall levels in bogs and all this type of information. And you put out a sensor, you don't want to send your guy back out there for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a couple of years even, and you want to control the device so that you don't want to if the sun is shining, you don't really want the device transmitting every minute. If you want to know the flow of the water, you do want to know every 4 or 5 minutes if it's a lashing rain, that it gets to transmit more often. But there's a trade-off between battery life and distance and where it's located and where it's if it moves and all of these factors kind of have an impact on the site, and your security then as well, about which technology you might use.
Yeah, and even just like a layer on top of that again, like when we started out, we used to go into companies and we talk about the technology and what it can do and what we thought the benefits were. And actually, that's not where we start at all anymore. So when we go into, a company like OnPost, where we track thousands of their roll cages around the country every day, we started off with actually a business case. So we didn't even talk about the technology. We worked out, because we spent a lot of time with companies where we would months and even years in some instance, where we would deal with the company and we go through the technology and they do a proof of concept and everything would work. But then they'd sit down and start looking at the business case and go, actually, this doesn't make sense. So now it's very important from our perspective, for both the customer and ourselves, to start with the business case, the return on investment. We've got very detailed processes around developing a business case and a return on investment. And when we get a green tick on that, then we move to, okay, how we design the solution and how or what technology we recommend for a particular use case. And sometimes that's Sigfox and sometimes it's not. It's really driven by the use case. There's no point in us or any other company forcing a technology on a customer where it doesn't make sense, because no one's going to win in the long run. It's just going to waste time and resources. And as I said, there isn't a technology that fits all. There's going to be lots of different deployments with different technologies depending on what you're trying to do.
So maybe the accounting skills weren't a complete waste, Will.
No. Thank God.
So I think we've actually covered a few of the questions, just really, really good. I think we've touched a little bit on the types of trends you're seeing in IoT, just on the use cases you're mentioning there. So a lot of transport monitoring, both of vehicles, pallets, cages. Diarmuid, you mentioned agriculture, flooding. Security, energy, and sustainability, are those big as well, or what are we seeing in Dublin or even Ireland as the big trends?
Yeah, so from our perspective anyway, one of the big use cases when we started out building the network was security. So we were seeing very good uptake with Sigfox operators in other countries within the security vertical. And that was mainly a company in Spain called Securitas Direct. So they're the equivalent of Phone Watch in Ireland, but on a much bigger scale. They're the largest provider of home and business security systems in Europe. And Securitas Direct, they were the first customer of Sigfox outside of France, where the technology was created. So the local operator in Spain is a company called Cellnex, and Cellnex are actually also have an Irish operation based in Sandyford. But their operation in Spain, they run the Sigfox network, so they're the equivalent of VT. And they signed a deal for over 2 million alarm systems with Securitas. So again, Securitas use cellular technology in their alarms as a SIM card, because users want to be able to log in and they want to be able to see video and have a voice as well. And the best technology for that particular use case is cellular, 3 or 4G, because you can transmit lots of data. And we're never going to be able to do that with Sigfox. But where they did find a use for Sigfox was as a backup connectivity. So they were able to, without any additional hardware costs, so without having to add any physical hardware to their alarms, they were able to send a firmware upgrade to all their 2 million alarms in Spain. And it enabled them to be Sigfox overnight, because with Sigfox, it's just a piece of firmware on a traditional RF chip. So technically you can upgrade any device that has a sub-gigahertz radio module in it. You can technically add Sigfox without having to add a new chip. So they did that, and the business case is amazing, you know.
We actually had Ishmael Pacheco on the webinar series in an earlier episode, and I understand that there will be a formal announcement in the coming weeks that Cellnex is working with one of its customers to support a national rollout of LoRa in LoRa network in Ireland, starting out in Dublin. So I think that the formal announcement is coming on that. So really, really exciting.
Yeah. So sorry, just to link that into Ireland then. So we were seeing that particular security use case in Spain, and we started approaching and working with some of the top security companies here in Ireland. So there's one in particular, which I won't name because I haven't distinctly had permission to do so yet, but they're using Sigfox to complement their existing CCTV service that they offer customers. So what they now have on sites, building sites and commercial premises and home premises are sensors for gates that essentially offer them an added layer of security. So they're able to deploy a sensor on a gate. It might cost less than 20 or 30 euros, and it tells them when the gate's open, and that then switches on the security system and allows them to monitor over CCTV. So we're seeing lots of use cases in the security industry here in particular.
A question has just come in from the attendees. Jared Corcoran looking at market share, and he's asking about what about cellular IoT, including MBiot and LTE-M, which is projected to have a 66% market share by 2025 and national secure coverage using existing 4.5G and future 5G networks. So I think that question is basically, is there going to be a dominant technology?
Well, from our perspective, as I kind of said a couple of times, it's not, MBiot is a great technology, but it's not going to cover every use case. Yes, it uses existing cellular infrastructure, but there's still an inherent cost because it's complex. So if you talk to any of the solution providers, and there's lots of them who have a portfolio of products that have different technologies, so they've got a LoRa version, a Sigfox version, MBiot version. The actual cost of the hardware, there's a huge difference depending on what type of connectivity technology you use. And then the ongoing connectivity costs as well.
You know, you have your battery life to think of there as well, Will. So,
yeah.
you know, definitely for agriculture and things like that, you know, when you're dealing with farmers and things, like I can't see them paying the type of money for MBiot. So you'd have a lot, like if you're, you know, if you had a sensor on every cow, like you know, your costs will kind of start to spiral out of control pretty quickly. But if you're losing, you know, depending on your use case, if you're using a LoRa WAN, you could even set, you know, well, you could potentially set up your own one, but if you're a farmer with the knowledge. But the you know, it's really about, you know, the battery life of things, and MBiot, as far as I'm aware, is power hungry, you know. So you know, and you know, you need the backhaul infrastructure then as well, the base stations, and you know, if you have Sigfox and it's got a 40 km range, you could cover the whole of Belgium with 7 base stations. In comparison, I'm sure it's you know, there's maybe a couple of in the tens or hundreds of base stations for MBiot. So the costs are a lot more, and with each base station, then, you know, you have to the infrastructure provider has to manage that and look after that and replace it if it breaks down, and you know, there's a lot of costs. The more equipment you have, the more it costs. So I think as that diagram in the second image I showed you there, there's pros and cons to each one, and depending on what you're doing, it's like if you're marking pallets and stuff, and you don't need that, you know, you only need 2 points a day where the GPS coordinates, you know, it's not going to be feasible putting a SIM card to do that for you, a power hungry SIM card to do it for you, you know. So you know, I wouldn't agree with that, but you know, it depends as well. Like a lot of this stuff might go on Wi-Fi as well. So you know, I think ambient assisted living, older people living in homes, and people in general living in homes, helping them to live. Like say for example, you know, somebody just forgets to turn off the cooker, and that just, you know, there's a system there that just knocks that off. To help people, like you know, even I've done it myself. I left the eggs boiling and went off and played a squash match and came back, and nearly burnt the house down, you know. So like that sort of stuff just helps people in general, and like you can do that sort of thing over Wi-Fi networks because, you know, more often than not there will be a Wi-Fi network there, and the Wi-Fi technology as well is increasing as well. So, you know, I can't see it all going to MBiot, but you know, let's see. It definitely will be trucks and things like that you can hook up that have lots of power. There'll be devices, you know, if you want to turn off and on lights at in an AstroTurf pitch or something, you might use MBiot because you know, it's going to be typically in a built-up area anyway, and you know, it'll be low cost for that scenario. You could even turn on and off your video cameras to see who's there and who's not there at the AstroTurf pitch. So you know, there'll be different use cases for different scenarios, and
Sure.
there won't
Yeah,
be one size fits all.
When the data requirement is higher, and yeah, the whole, you know, remote control access as well. Again, it's all down to the use case. Like MBiot, it's lucky in a lot of countries they can do a firmware upgrade on the existing equipment, but there's still a hefty license fee that they need to pay to the equipment provider, Huawei or Ericsson. So it's not, there's this kind of, there's a false narrative in the market that it's simply an upgrade and it's free. There's a cost with everything. So again, you know, there's going to be plenty of use cases where it makes complete sense and it's the only technology that makes sense. But while the power requirement is lower than traditional cellular, it's still higher than the likes of Sigfox because of the repetitions that are required. But then again, if you look, you know, indoor coverage, because of the repetitions, okay, it uses more power, but you're probably going to get a better performance indoors, you know. So yeah, it just really depends on what you're trying to achieve, you know.
The other thing is, and actually forgot to mention it, is you know, it's across license spectrum. So you know, I saw something about for each it's very expensive for license spectrum, whereas Sigfox, LoRaWAN, some of the other technologies are across they're open. I forget the name. Will
they're on like unlicensed
unlicensed spectrum.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
sorry, totally just dropped out of my head there. But so you know, there is a cost for that. You know, there will be a cost, and it is quite different. You know, it's a little bit different, I think. You know. And there's a lot of factors to consider there, really.
Guys,
like
I'm just conscious of time here, so we've about 5 minutes or less left. We have a few questions from the attendees, and we could do these quick fire a little bit. One question: is there a map that compares the coverage and reliability of the various LP1 options currently available? Sigfox, MBiot, LoRa, etc.
Yeah, so I'll just start off there with Sigfox. We have when you sign up for an account, and anyone can sign up for an account, just get onto VT and we can open an account for you. It's free, but when you get your login, there's a tab that shows you a very detailed coverage map, and you can search by address in there. You can also go to the Sigfox website, and that'll just give you a general overview of the coverage in each country. And if you go to our own website, there is a special address tool. So you can type in your address or your postcode, any postcode in the world, not just Ireland, and it'll tell you, it'll give you an indicator as to what the predicted coverage is. We don't have comparisons between the other technologies, but I'm sure for MBiot, you can get onto Vodafone, and I'm sure they'll send you a map, and same with the various LoRa networks. There isn't a commercial LoRa network in Ireland, so yet, but in other countries there are, so the likes of France, and you can definitely get maps the same way that you can with
for the Pervasive Nation Nation network. It's, you know, we're a research test bed, so it's very ephemeral. We've base stations pop up and down as and when needed, you know. So we will have maps up on our website though in the next 2 weeks, so we're just updating the website. But there's also the Things network, which has some coverage in Ireland, but again, it's I think a lot of the base stations are you know, they're kind of indoor gateways and stuff. They wouldn't be kind of commercial outdoor kind of with coverage and stuff. So wouldn't be massive coverage. Yeah, so that, I guess that kind of.
And just following on from that again, we've talked about a little bit in terms of the differences in cost depending on the battery, the data usage and that. But what roughly are we talking about in terms of the price between LoRa, Sigfox? Is it annual, monthly? Is it fixed? And what ballpark are we talking as well?
Yeah, so from our perspective, what we have is we've got a public price grid, and there's 3 different subscription levels depending on how much data you want. Because the highest subscription level is 140 messages a day. The lowest subscription level is 2 messages a day. The one that suits you will depend on your use case. So you pick your subscription level, and then there's different volume buckets. So obviously the higher the volume, the lower the cost. And our subscriptions range from, if you come to connect 1 subscription on the network, at the highest package, you know, that's less than €10 per year per device, and that goes the whole way down to 99 cents per year per device, depending on the number that you want to connect and the amount of data you need to send. So yeah, anything between €1 and €10 a year. That includes the price of the subscription, includes access to the Sigfox backend, the APIs to retrieve your data, all the security in between. And most importantly, the SLA. So that's what the majority of customers are using our network for, because they get an SLA that the network will be up online 99.9% of the time, the message delivery in terms of the base stations, but also in terms of their data from our cloud to their cloud. So that's quite important.
The best way to link in with the Pervasive Nation network, I think, is probably using an Enterprise Ireland Innovation Voucher. This initiative is best methods. The idea is to build links between Ireland's public knowledge providers, higher education institutes, public research bodies, and small businesses. The innovation vouchers are worth about €5,000 and are available to assist companies to explore the business opportunities or problems with, you know, that they might have in IoT or using LoRa. There's also collaborative projects which extend beyond IoT that are available from the Connect Center for Future Networks, or the Enable Center in Trinity College, and any other center that I know that there's CIT have a very good chip development center. So if a company for example, with these centers, if a company provides 10K to support research activities, the center will match that funding. So and will support the research and development of the idea for users. So there is other models of accessing the network, but you'd need to contact us directly for that. But we're not commercial. That's kind of our main thing. We don't have a price model or thing like that.
Absolutely. Brilliant. I think we'll wrap it up there. I think the main themes from today were basically, you know, you can do a huge amount with this technology, but not one of LoRa, Sigfox, or MBiot at the moment can do everything. So there's a balancing act between what you want to do, what your use case is, and which technology is going to fit. I think we covered a huge amount of ground, so I want to thank Diarmuid and Will for coming. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on the Smart Dublin website. I'd like to thank also our partners, Smart Dublin, Enable and Connect in Trinity College Dublin, Sandyford BID, and Dunleer at Down County Council. Please join us for our next webinar on the 9th of September. And as always, if you're interested in contacting our speakers or getting involved with Smart Sandyford, please do get in touch. Thanks very much. Cheers, guys.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Bill.